Hello and welcome to another video so we're on to the version 2 of the HavenCraft deck that I've been talking about in the comments of the previous HavenCraft video. Of course, this one is a little more well-rounded, I think, especially looking at some both suggestions and other builds that had been coming out around the time of launch, and it's not surprising. So of course, Aether White Wing, a huge addition to the deck, making Holy Lion very easy to pull, so perfect for that. Otherwise, really the only other big addition is Sealed Tomb, and a few smaller additions here and there and a few number changes, like Seraphic Blade is now common in most of these decks, as it really was to begin with. I had initially cut Seraphic Blade as I was trying to favour some better cards. The only real iffy thing in this entire deck for me is Hollow Dogma, as I don't think it really has enough targets. You know, it's really only got Globe, maybe Sealed Tomb, but that's really just a one-turn thing, so really hard to use that as a direct target, and other than that, it's only got Moriekrim, which isn't that great as a target to begin with, unless you have both in hand right off the cusp, so I'm really iffy on Hollow Dogma, but everything else, super solid, still performs extremely well, and we're going to get right into it and check it out. So the main thing you're banking on with this deck is of course being able to just flood board with lions as kind of quickly as possible, but at the same time you might want to hold off. I've actually found you're better off playing the Ward Lion out, and pretty much just using that repeatedly will really screw your opponent over, as it has got pretty incredible stats, so it's definitely a good way to go. So getting Holy Lion of Salvation is still a really solid card. Sealed Tomb for our turn 1 is pretty much perfect, so being able to have a decent turn 1 play is normally important, and I pretty much never play Holy Lion of Salvation on turn 1. I actually can't think of any situation where I do. If I was ever going to use it as a 1-drop, it would definitely be if I could guarantee lethal off it, or if I was already out of play points, evolution points to use. So getting the early Holy Lion, pretty perfect. I mean, we've already got a Peace Weaver for turn 3 if we need it. Grand Spire, unfortunately, is a pretty decent counter though, hitting us pretty hard. And this hand's a little awkward. Triple Black Inscripture, while not bad, is definitely clunky. And since they played double Grand Spire, we're definitely looking at a pretty negative outcome for us, although our Holy Lion is going to pretty much oppress this board now, which is perfect. Most of these games are usually pretty quick, and when they're not, usually you can dominate pretty easily. The only real risk would be something like a Giant Chimera deck, which we will actually be covering next video. That's the deck I've got planned next. Mysteria, Magic Founder, no surprise there honestly. Founder's pretty popular now, especially for any kind of burn. So we got plenty of Black Inscriptions to remove these, and pretty comfortable Holy Lion again, this time going face. Really just trying to build that up. Since we do have Aether of White Wing next turn, we're going to be able to get even more lions, so definitely going to be taking advantage of it. And we can pretty much ignore Magic Founder. So normally I'd be a bit iffy on what to consider here, but definitely I think Aether is perfect. I could have just Black Inscripture, but I felt like going the more oppressive route was definitely the way to do things. Even if it does cost me a little bit.
So it was you, after all.
So a 1, 3, 4, 8 and a 4, 4 is a pretty solid board to work with. Now the best target for the Seraphic Blade in this deck tends to be the Earth Sigils, as you don't want them to get Verdict Rituals through the new Legendary, so it's definitely the thing we're going to be targeting. Now I did go for the Black Inscripture plays first, Seraphic Blade, and since Father of Punishment isn't going to be doing a lot for us, playing him out on his own is going to be fine, since we don't have any Evo points to take advantage of. So it looks like they're aiming to really flood their board here. And there we go, there's the 3 Verdict Rituals. They do deal 5 damage each at the moment, which is a pretty rough time, but not lethal, so that's definitely okay. So we can go face for a little bit of damage, putting them to 6 is fairly good. Another Magic Founder, so the most damage their Verdict Rituals can now deal is going to be 6. So that would have been 1 off lethal for them. What a rough time that is, that's why they obviously target the board here. So I go for the Temple, going for my Holy Lion Crystals where I can now.
So it was you, after all.
And because I couldn't go for lethal, it was definitely better off taking that out They used up all their Verdict rituals, and we had more than enough health to survive most things anyway, so definitely ended up a warranted concede there. Now, to follow on immediately from that is a HavenCraft. Not one of the hardest matchups for this deck typically, as you do have some decent removal. Honestly, version 2 seems to be doing pretty well for me at the moment. Definitely not a... I don't know if I'd call it a top tier deck by far, but it's definitely a solid deck, and I think it's going to be pretty respectable going forward. Also, the legendaries have been cut down, which is always good for a deck like this. As Legendary Fighter and Holy Lion of Salvation being the only real legendaries in this deck is super solid. So this one, we're going more down the Temple of Holy Lion route, since that is what we drew, as going for that is usually a lot more beneficial, as it does allow you to just pump Holy Lions, especially turn 3 if you already have one crystal. You can really just pump out a few, which is really nice. Unfortunately, we are going first, which means Holy Lion of Salvation has to wait till turn 5 to really have any advantage to our board. Luckily, we did draw another Holy Lion. Unfortunately, we can't use it though, so that was a pretty big downfall for us. At least we are baiting out some of this removal here. If you end up in a mirror match though against Haven, you really want to save your Seraphic Blades to target the Holy Lion Temples. They're really going to be a key thing to destroy. So we get a chance for our Holy Lion of Salvation, which is also going to give us a Holy Lion Crystal, so we're actually able to pretty much flood the board with lions at this point. I do decide to use the Black Inscription though, as I really wanted to favour removing their board. Plus, our Holy Lion Crystal will be pretty beneficial next turn, where we can pump 2 Lion Crystals to that board, or just go for 1 and maybe even something else, so definitely not bad. This deck really is a lot of fun to play and reasonably cheap, so definitely worth it. Aether of White Wing though was too good to pass up for our draw. And our opponent, obviously realizing they couldn't compete with that again, ended up conceding anyway. And following on, we're up against Shadow. No shocker there, Shadow is still performing reasonably well. It's definitely a tough battle if they get a perfect curve, but outside of that, usually it's a pretty even match, at least from what I've played so far with this deck. There's still a lot of testing going on as of making this video, as we're only about 4 days in when I've made this, so it's definitely still a lot of testing phases. We're definitely coming to an end of it though, so we're going to see some really solid deck lists and probably even tier lists coming out as of this video's release. I reckon tier lists usually come out about the first week, so wouldn't be surprised if Mana Surge and stuff have their lists going up. So we start off pretty well, this time going the more amulet heavy start, which is pretty beneficial. We also have 3 Aether of White Wing, even though only 2 of them at the moment would be beneficial. But it's looking to be a really solid game. That's all the Shadow player really goes for here, which isn't too bad for us. We get a fairly decent removal. We have a decent chance to use Holy Lion of Salvation. We've got a pretty stocked up hand. Although these Aethers are now not useless, but definitely not super beneficial to us, they're still going to pull something when they're played, even if they don't have a Holy Lion target later on. Cerberus, Hound of Hades, definitely a super oppressive card. It just has so many benefits to it, there's really no letdown. It both floods the boards, gives ping effects, gives heal effects, gives face damage. It's insane with an Evo point. Lucky for us though, our Holy Lions are pretty dominant for this matchup. So I'd be a bit careful on how I play this out to start with, as I don't want to go too hard too fast. So we kind of space things out pretty evenly. And since it's only turn 6, we don't need to worry about anything too major coming down with a body on board. It's really next turn that we have to be a little concerned. Which the Shadow player obviously goes, nope, can't deal with this, and leaves anyway. So having played a reasonable amount of lines now, I've got to say, by far, this is definitely an improvement over the other deck, which is no shock. Version 2 is usually always an improvement when I'm messing around with decks. But overall, this is just super solid and reasonably cheap. I mean, we aren't running that many legendaries. I did say we're only running the 2, but actually I forgot Aether. That makes it 3, so we'll correct that there. So that's, what, 9 legendaries for the entire deck. of which either can be used in more than just this deck, and Legendary Fighter is a neutral, so it can be used in a lot of variations of decks. Even if they aren't that popular, these are definitely the more optimal decks to be running these cards. And then Holy Line of Salvation, just a super solid card as is. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it sees a nerf, whether it's just a basic stat nerf in the future, so there probably isn't going to be a big letdown from crafting that. And if you are looking for something that you've probably already got more than enough cards for, considering Holy Lion was a budget-oriented deck to begin with, then this is definitely something to play if you're interested in Haven. Otherwise, I hope you did enjoy the video. Hit the like button and subscribe. You will find the deck list in the description below. Until next time, see ya.